So in my very last video, we were kind of discussing this idea of what makes effective questioning. We sort of said, look, one of the typical ways of doing things is to think of some questions. Maybe you plan them beforehand and you actually target individual students to actually answer these questions. So these loops are kind of targeted students. And if we've got a class of 24 people and we've got 5 questions over the course of a lesson, or who knows, more or fewer students, whatever the combination is, we might eventually be able to work our way around students and ask each student a question through some kind of targeting mechanism. Now, I'm going to argue, to be provocative, that that isn't enough, that methodology doesn't provide an efficient questioning structure which provokes all learners and helps learners to collaborate on answers so that they actually pull resources and learn from one another. So in the purposes of this video, I'm going to literally try and present to you one other example, and we're going to assume that the same teacher has thought about this same brilliant question. I think I use the term magnificent question. So let's first of all set up the class differently. So what I'd like our classroom to look like, and it's going to be quite generic still, but I'm going to have console tables. So rather than having students in lines behind desks, I'm going to have some kind of arrangement of console tables. And please don't judge me if these aren't perfectly uniform or absolutely oblong, but for my 24 students, I'm going to put them on 6 groups of 4 consoles. So I guess in a typical situation, you're going to have, in order to kind of make sure that people can see the board well, we're going to have person 1, person 2, person 3, and person 4. And we're going to repeat that on all of the tables. Okay, so that's the first thing. So my actual classroom setup is going to help me better structure, amongst other things, my questioning technique. Okay, so now I've got my tables set up. Also, I want you to be aware that in the middle of each and every one of these console tables is a little mini whiteboard. So I'm going to draw a little mini whiteboard. Here it is. There's my little mini whiteboard. It looks a bit bigger than my tables because I'm not doing it to the same scale. And I've got a pen. And it's possible to write on the whiteboard particular answers. And this is going to go one on each table, right? You get the idea. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but one on each table. So let's come back to my question. I've got a question which is burning and I think it's a really, really red hot question for the stuff that we've been learning. But I want that question to provoke every single learner in the group. So this is how I would go about doing it. Perhaps you can think of better or an adapted way. So I've got my question. Let's say, it's not going to be this one obviously, but let's say, what colour is the sky? If anyone's watching this and you live in the UK, the answer, by the way, is not grey. I'm looking for the answer blue. So what colour is the sky? So obviously, the question needs to be related to what you're doing, and it's probably going to be a far more elevated question than this one. But this is what we're going to do. First of all, we're going to tell the group that there's a question coming. So every student will know that there's a question about to be provoked in all of them. The teacher is then going to ask the question and give a specific time limit for the answer to be provided. So let's say, for argument's sake, that the teacher has agreed with his or her group that the answering time is 20 seconds. So that's going to be a very strict answering time, okay? Or the thinking time, I should say, is going to be 20 seconds. The teacher then asks their questions, or asks their individual question, what colour is the sky, or whatever the equivalent would be, and every single person in the group has to have an answer. Now, you might immediately say, well, how do you check they've got an answer? And you do it like this. When the 20 seconds is up, this teacher is going to use some kind of number spinner. It could be like one of these little number spinners where, you know, you've got number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and somewhere in the middle you've got like a little spinning object which rotates and points to one number or another. It could be that you just pull numbers out of a hat. It could be that you use a rand between function on Excel. It could be that you use a number spinner on your iPad, for argument's sake. But somehow you must completely randomly generate a number between 1 and 4, or it could be 1 and 3 if you've put them in consoles of 3, for example, or 1 and 5 if that's what you've chosen to do. But the key thing is that a number has to be random. Every person in the room, every student must understand that potentially, you know, if you're a number 1, potentially your number 1 could come up again and again and again and again and again. So with 5 questions, it could well be you potentially that answers those 5 questions over and over and over again. So the teacher chooses, let's say for argument's sake, number 1. All right. Once the 20 seconds of discussion time is up, and that 20 seconds no writing is allowed, the number ones, when number one is selected, they take the mini whiteboard, here it is, from the middle of the table, and they write their answer onto the board. And let's say to do this, they've got 10 seconds, just for argument's sake. And again, the teacher is strict with that protocol. 20 seconds for discussion, 10 seconds for answering. After 10 seconds, the whiteboards all get presented by all the number ones to the front of the class. All of the number ones, all of whom are answering by this point, present their answer to the front of the class. And the teacher, quite simply, checks that they're correct. And maybe when the teacher's checked whether his or her group has got them correct, maybe he has on his whiteboard over here, maybe he has T1 gets a score, maybe or table 2, maybe table 3 gets a tally of score, and table 4. Maybe you can keep the scores and see how each table's getting on with each of the questions that you ask. But think about this. The question, you might say, well, that's provoked 6 people to answer, but no. In that 20 seconds, every person in the room knew that they could be the one pinpointed to answer that question. What's more is that they had all of the resources of the people on their table to help them answer that question. So let's just say that this number 4 here is some kind of real smart student and has done their homework and has done their prior reading and all that kind of stuff, and the other 3 aren't too sure. Well, in the 20 seconds, this number 4 can quickly explain the answer to his 3 mates that way, thereby actually sharing the knowledge he or she has developed in the process of his or her own studies, and therefore enriching the knowledge of others. And of course, one of the others gets to present their answer. Okay, the teacher then goes on to their second question. Second question is, what colour is the sun? Hopefully they're going to write yellowy orange or whatever the colour the sun actually is. And again, 20 seconds for the thinking time. The teacher then randomly, remember, selects the answering number, and let's say this time it's number 4. This time all the number 4s have 10 seconds to put their answers on the board, which has now been wiped clean, and they then present to the front. And thereby 5 questions, look, still taking 20 seconds plus 10 seconds, 5 questions now that have taken 2.5 minutes in total, 2.5 minutes in total, have provoked every single learner in the room and have encouraged the learners to collaborate and share their understanding. I hope you can also see now as well that, okay, when you actually put a lesson structure in like this, something like a table plan, something like a seating plan actually has significance, right? A seating plan all of a sudden becomes significant because, which ideas do you want to encourage there to be sharing of? Where do you want that sharing to occur? Where do you want one person maybe coaching others? Do you want all the tables equally strong? Do you want to have one strong person with 3 apparently lower performing students? How do you want to do it? The seating plan has significance. And I think this is a really, really exciting method. Now, look, just in terms of naming this thing, if we were studying Kagan's structures, which is kind of where I've borrowed this from, we would be calling this method the numbered heads together. Okay, the numbered heads together. And I like that heads together method because it allows for collaboration. It allows for us to actually pool and share our knowledge, and it allows for us to collaborate on what will hopefully be brilliant answers. Don't forget, your questions must be magnificent to get the best out of this. Thanks for listening, and I hope that makes a lot of sense to you. Cheers.